So yeah, I think I'd just like to start off by thanking you guys for the invite. It's lovely to see you virtually. It's better than nothing. And nice to meet Martin and to welcome my friend Dr. David Rabin here, who's been on my podcast a couple times and someone that I've done some private sessions with and has benefited me immensely. So we're in really good company. And my fiance, Allison.
Mazel tov.
This is the first public announcement, I think, of our engagement.
Yeah, we haven't done anything.
I got a little sneak peek the other day. I was like, yeah, brother.
Congratulations.
Your family.
Yeah, we got engaged in Mexico. What was that, a month ago now?
At least, yeah.
Yeah, and we, took photos and videos and stuff, and we came back and we're like, I guess we're supposed to post it or tell people, and we haven't gotten around to it. So here we are. But anyway, on to the topic at hand. I think it's
Well, Luke, I'm trying to get Howard Martin in here. Can you activate the video, Howard? I'm not able to see you for some reason.
Oh, I got my camera on, and can you hear me?
I hear you clearly.
Okay. I'll do the camera. I'll cut it off and cut it back on. Hopefully that works.
We are able to see him on our end.
Okay. For some reason I can't.
Good to see you all. I can see everyone. Good to meet you, Luke, from a distance, as you mentioned. It's a pleasure to be with you.
likewise, brother, likewise.
Yeah, we'll figure out how to pin you in here, but go ahead and get started.
Okay, Dave, do you want to unmute yourself, or are you just being a good Zoomer and staying muted while you're not talking?
The latter, but I'm happy to unmute. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're audible. So check, but that's good Zoom etiquette. When you have group Zooms, it's always challenging when someone has a kid in the background, or in our case, leaf blowers are often the culprits. But I just want to start out again by thanking you guys for having us, and really excited to have this conversation, as is everyone here, I'm sure. And for me, this is the most important conversation perhaps to have, and that is to encourage people to explore consciousness as being something other than their body, their sensations, their thoughts, the projection of the holographic life that we spend so much time in. And I think it's more important than ever right now that everyone learns every tool that's available to us, whether it's an etheric tool or some of the shamanic tools Allison's going to discuss, or some of the actual physical technologies and electric technologies that have been so instrumental in my own awakening, and just in having the ability to monitor and control my nervous system, and to upgrade all forms of meditation and prayer and everything. And so I think it's a really great way to have a conversation. So perhaps I might start with my lovely Allison, and you could just kind of introduce yourself and give your perspective on the tools that you use, because as we have been living together since the beginning of the I don't want to call it a pandemic, because I don't truly believe it is, but let's just say, the lockdown. I like the lockdown.
I prefer the awakening.
The awakening, thank you. See, there you go. That's the shamanic perspective. But we live together, and we have such different ways of connecting and grounding ourselves. And, I've got all of these gadgets, and I'm going to share some of those. And, I'll be downstairs with,
well, where's that big giant, the big disc that you had over here? Like,
yeah,
to have that
I'll
on
be
your
down.
chest.
I'll be downstairs with enough technology to, probably buy a car, and she's got her rattle and her drum, and she seems to arrive at the same place. So perhaps you could start out just by talking about how you use inner technology and more traditional indigenous technologies to connect.
Sure. So for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, my name is Allison Charles, and I'm a shaman and author and spiritual teacher. I had a massive spiritual awakening and divine intervention a number of years ago, and that really completely changed the entire course of my life. And the first, at the time when I lay out some of these steps that I share, I didn't know at the time that they were, necessarily consciousness hacks, but looking back, I think they all do fit into this category And the first consciousness hack that I had that I know both Luke and I share very deeply on is the hack of surrender. And when you finally get out of your own way and learn to get into the rhythm and dance and co-creation with Source, Great Spirit, Great Mother Earth, your own divine power, light, love, and wisdom within you, that's when you can really start to access these other consciousness dimensions and realms. And you know, I'm guessing that everyone here is on the spiritual path, and so we all know the places that we can traverse within our own being and outside of ourselves in the unseen realms is truly infinite in nature. So that's actually my favorite aspect of it, is the continuous learning and growing and evolutionary nature of it. But for me, the keys and where my name Rock Star Shaman comes from is really the fact that for my shamanic path and the way my medicine works is I connect directly to Gaia, Great Mother Earth, Rock, and directly up to Source, Consciousness Field, Great Spirit, Star. And of course, we can't leave out, you know, our own soul. And so the biggest key, and I think the biggest note that I want to share, because I know we've got like four people sharing this hour at least, but I definitely can't go without stressing the importance of uniting with your soul. And I think overall that would be the biggest consciousness hack there is, because the source of suffering and the source of confusion and not understanding why we incarnated, not understanding our calling, our mission, the root of those things are disconnection, right? You know, disconnection from our truth, disconnection from the infinite power and nature of our soul, disconnection from nature and all the continuous teachings of the plants and the trees and the animals and the whispers of the winds. So making a commitment and deciding to devote to practices that will unite you as one with your soul more and more and more are the biggest hacks. And I think we'll get to more specifics maybe as this time ventures on, but I'll just make note that when we come back around, I can maybe demonstrate the drum and my shamanic rattle and some of the sacred essences and smudges that you can burn. And my book and card deck are all about power animals. So learning how to connect with your benevolent guides, whether they're archangels or ascended masters or power animals. These are all various ways that you can definitely expand in consciousness infinitely. So those are some of my favorites.
Cool. Thank you so much. I don't know what's happening, what you guys see, but no matter who's talking, I see Dave on the screen.
You've got a great background.
Yeah,
so.
He tops the background on the green screen is on point. So I don't know if there's a setting there or what is going on. I don't mind looking at Dave and his beautiful sailboats. And I'll just go ahead and pass it to you. But
if you go to gallery view, Luke, it should be a little light up in the far right hand corner. If you go to gallery view, you see a little Hollywood Squares thing go on.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
That should do it. We see you guys though.
Okay, good.
Okay, great.
Good. Okay,
That's better.
gallery view. Thank you so much. So I might as well just go to you, Dave. And I know, we've had so many fascinating conversations, and they've been very well received by the people that listen to my podcast. And every time I've talked to you, it's just been absolutely fascinating. So your background is, of course, in psychiatry and neuroscience, if I'm not mistaken. And so the conversations we have around consciousness are sort of two-part. There's the psychoanalytical model, and then there's also the inclusion of the therapeutic clinical use of psychedelics. And in my own experience, that particular realm has been something that's opened up in the past couple of years and has just been an incredible tool for me. I've shared some experiences with some people here on the call, including in my lovely Allison here, which is really what brought our relationship together. And then in addition to that, Dave, the work that you've done with the Apollo is something that I'd really love for you to share about, because it's been, I mean, I didn't put it on because we're having our Zoom. I literally have this thing on.
I can vouch for this. He goes to bed with it on. I mean, it's always on. So you've invented quite a contraption there.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
right now I'm on the open and social setting, and
Me too.
and every interview I have this thing on. So I'd love for you to explain that, and you'll save me the stumbling through trying to explain it myself. So perhaps you could give your take, Dave, on ways to explore and expand consciousness, whether on the technological side or through therapy, plant medicine, psychedelics, etc.
Sure, happy to, and I really appreciate you for having me. And I appreciate, congratulations, by the way, Mazel Tov to both of you. It's very exciting. I think that there's so much to talk about here. I think your example of facilitating union between two people is a really interesting one, because what we do what we strive to do in psychotherapy, when it works well and when we're practicing it properly, is to bring together the union of the self. So the idea that the self that we present to the outside world is the same as the self that we know ourselves to be, and that when there's dissonance or disconnection between those two selves, or one of the selves is rejected or split or fractured, then that often contributes substantially to a lot of the psychopathology and mental illness that we ended up suffering as symptoms. And just for those who don't know me, my background is in psychiatry and neuroscience. I'm a clinical researcher. I've been studying chronic stress and resilience for a better part of 15 years now. And I also have a clinical psychiatry practice where I focus mostly on treatment-resistant PTSD, depression, anxiety, and substance use disorders, all the way through from traditional approaches, from traditional psychiatry and psychoanalysis and Jungian dream therapy and these kinds of things, all the way through to more empathy-based, motivational-based therapies, as well as psychedelic psychotherapy. And I think one of the things that always stood out to me throughout my entire training and also in my clinical practice is this idea of safety within the self. And that, our nervous system we're often taught, that the nervous system is so complex and it's so unique, and we're so unique as humans from all the other species out there in the world. And ultimately, I think that is a sort of a misconception, in that we are unique, but we are also built within the same conscious framework as everything else around us, whether that's Earth or as you were saying, the source energy, which itself is conscious, and the animals and everything around us. It's all sort of part of this conscious network of energy that surrounds us. And the more that we respect ourselves by providing ourselves with safety through practice and techniques that facilitate safety, and that safety being emotional, mental, physical, legal, financial, as much spiritual, as much as we can, the more that we can facilitate opportunities or generate opportunities for healing ourselves and then healing others. And there's lots of different takes on this and lots of different ways to approach it. And I'm sure you're going to hear lots of different approaches from everyone who's here talking. But I think the way that we really look at it from my perspective and sort of where psychiatry has been and where it's going into the future is that psychiatry has traditionally been about, exploring the subconscious and trying to unify the subconscious with the conscious, basically unify the subconscious being what's typically beneath our awareness, which is most of our experience, with what's always in our awareness, which is our conscious experience, and creating harmony between those two sources of input for us. And that creates our sort of unique mental and physical and spiritual experience that is unique to us. And so when we work with people, unfortunately, psychiatry has moved in a direction where it's been very medicalized, and we focus a lot on prescription drugs and things that are really externalizing the healing process and really sort of showing people that you or telling people that you need a medicine, you need to take something every day to change the way that you feel because there's something wrong with you. And that whole process, that whole approach in and of itself creates a fractured sense of self. It teaches us that we require something from outside of ourselves to heal ourselves. And ultimately, that, couldn't be further from the truth. And I think we see this with, as one of the best examples is not only with breath work and ancient practices of meditation and Eastern healing and tribal healing, but also with the current practices of psychedelic medicine with MDMA and psilocybin and ketamine, where if you look at these protocols as they go through the clinical testing in Western culture, what they talk about, especially MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, that's really funding all of the MDMA work right now for treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder, really talks about awakening and energizing and empowering this inner healing intelligence that exists within all of us that we can activate, similar to what you were saying earlier, this idea of connecting with our soul and connecting our soul with everything else around us, and recognizing that even if we don't think about it, that those connections are always there. And so the more that we can be aware of those connections, the more that we can bring those connections into our day-to-day lives, our day-to-day practice through simple techniques like the practice of gratitude on a daily basis, or as often as possible, self-gratitude, self-forgiveness, self-compassion, and self-love, which are these sort of 4 ancient principles that stem back to ancient tribal medicine, as much as they stem from ancient Buddhism and Eastern practices. These are universal in the way that they help us reconnect with ourselves and sort of awaken our own internal healing process. And part of that work, or I guess what came out of that work, which is heavily influenced by the way we see MDMA and psilocybin working in just a few doses to induce long-term remission for years in people with treatment-resistant depression and PTSD, is this idea that we're teaching people how to make themselves feel safe again. And that when they work on safety techniques like gratitude as probably the simplest safety technique, and breath work being another one that works very well hand in hand with gratitude, as one of the most important ways that we interface with the world around us by taking an intentional breath, then this creates opportunity to allow ourselves to connect our mind and our bodies back with our spirit. And, we talk about this often, like our minds can be anywhere. They can be in the past, they can be in the future. Oftentimes that's where we find them focused, particularly at times of intense stress like we're in right now as a community. And so taking that time could not be more important now to bring our minds and our bodies back into center together. The problem is that as much as these Eastern techniques have coexisted with us for a long time, yoga and movement meditation, breath work, mindfulness, the list is so deep and goes on for so long that these techniques are very powerful, but they also require a lot of discipline and practice. And when we're already in a state of stress and we haven't learned how to use those techniques and really tap into them, they become even harder to engage with, because when we're in a state of chronic stress, our nervous system is triggered towards fear of anything new, including change itself. And so we actually, through my research into this area at the University of Pittsburgh from 2014 to 2018, we developed the Apollo technology, which delivers gentle sound waves of vibration similar to drumming, similar to shamanic singing that we experience with Icaros in Peru, and similar to someone holding your hand, a loved one holding your hand or holding a pet, and feeling the connection between yourself, your body, and someone else or something else that reminds us that if we're safe enough to take the time to pay attention to this feeling of something soothing on our bodies, then we can't possibly be running from a lion in this moment. And that allows us to recenter ourselves very quickly back into our bodies. And so the Apollo technology was our first attempt to give people something that they could take with them, not only in therapy, but also on the go. I wear it also every day. It's a huge game changer for me in my life, and all of my colleagues wear it as well. And it just helps to give us the benefit of what we would get with tens of thousands of hours of deep breathing when we weren't necessarily taught to do that as children, when that's really the time to be learning these techniques. And we can learn them anytime, but it's really hard to engage in those techniques, legitimately difficult when we are so wrapped up in all of these craziness that's going on around us all the time. And so Apollo is a tool, just like breath work, just like meditation, just like music, that is effectively music that is composed based on the neuroscience of how we respond to touch, that you can take with you all the time. And so that's one of many tools that we use, including psychedelics, including the psychotherapy techniques of all different kinds, including breath work that help to facilitate access to this more unified, centered sense of self. And I could talk about this for a while, so I'll stop there and pass it on to someone else. But thank you again for having me, and I'm excited to be part of this discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That's great. I love there's so many takeaways and offshoots that are possible there. But I think one thing that really hit home in your your experience and take on this is that place of center and that ability to connect to our soul and operate in our lives from that perspective is facilitated by tools, whether they be something physical that we take on, from the outside, like the Apollo or any of the other different devices I have around the house, or the breath work. But I think the key there is that what we're looking for is something that we already possess, and so I know that this has been not a hard lesson, but a one that's come to me slowly, in that thinking that a psychedelic or a Kundalini yoga class or some technology is doing something for me that I can't do, and that I need that thing. So there's this other kind of dependency on that gadget or modality. Whereas from your perspective, and I think it's so wisely pointed out, that these things are just tools that help us more quickly and effectively access that power that we have within ourselves. And I think that's a really strong framework to start from, because it's really easy to get caught up on the dependency on something outside of ourselves to fix us. So that's a great perspective. And for those watching, what Dave's referring to on the Apollo, I can put it in the camera and then we'll move on to something else, because this thing, I'm just obsessed with this thing. But basically it's basically looks like a watch, right? And it has a Velcro strap. And then there's an app, and this is not a sale for Dave's thing. I'm just legitimately excited about it. And I know if I was watching, I'd want to know what the hell they're talking about. And then there's an app that activates various frequencies that vibrate on your wrist or on your ankle. And so you just kind of choose the mood you want to be in. And it sounds crazy, but it actually works. Like, especially I find two of them, the one I'm using now, the open and social one, it really does it's like half a glass of wine. It's crazy without all the side effects and glyphosate. And then the other one for work, the focus one, clear and focused, I think it is. Every time I have to sit down at the computer and do some extensive work that requires left and right hemisphere action, I put that on. So thank you for creating something so amazing. It's rare that I'm impressed by stuff like this, because I'm in the business of researching and using it. And so I'm really excited about it. So let's move on.
Luke.
Yeah. So let's move on to Howard with HeartMath. And Howard, I think I found out about the organization HeartMath, I want to say over 10 years ago, I think, from Greg Braden is the first guy that I heard talking about HeartMath and integrating that framework into some of his work. And then, of course, more recently, Joe Dispenza, after going to his events. And I'd like to get perhaps from you your perspective on what you guys are doing in terms of quantifying different states. I think it's really fascinating where we are now with technology, that we have the ability to actually monitor and determine what's going on with our mental states, brainwaves, physiology, et cetera. So perhaps from your perspective, you could give some insights on what's cutting edge in terms of being able to use different types of biofeedback to determine that the way we think we feel is in fact the way we feel, and what works and what doesn't work out of all these options we have available to us.
I'll be happy to. Thank you very much, Luke, for the introduction. Greetings to everyone. I'm not here to talk much about myself or about HeartMath. I'd rather use my time to talk about consciousness hacking. That'd be more fun for me. But
Sure.
Very briefly, I'm Howard Martin. I'm a best-selling author of a couple of books, and film producer and speaker, all that stuff, and one of the executives here at HeartMath. I've been with HeartMath since its inception now over 30 years ago. And Doc Childry is our founder of HeartMath. Our vision all along was to do what we could to create a heart-connected world. We work on ourselves continuously. We did in the beginning, and that's what happens every single day to day. We follow our hearts and our intuition, and it's unfolded into what I would call now a big little organization. We have a huge global footprint. We operate all over the world. Tens and tens of thousands of people, millions actually, are following HeartMath, and it's been an interesting ride for me along the way. HeartMath is a heart-based system. It consists of techniques, technology, methods, training programs, lots of different aspects of HeartMath. And one of the keys to that, when we were introducing a heart-based system into the world, we wanted it to have mainstream impact. We weren't going to settle for it being a nice, sweet offering out of California, which is where we're based. It had to be something that was going to have mainstream impact and kind of cut through some of the societal issues that were taking place. To do that, we recognized that heart needed to be characterized a little differently, that it had been talked about for thousands of years, and people had a sort of a general understanding of what heart is. And it manifests in so many different ways in a person's life, but yet it just wasn't being taken down to the street enough. It was still in the realms of philosophy and spirituality and a nice thing to have, but in the context of this crazy world we live in, it was sort of getting left out of the picture. So to build a bridge between what we felt people intuitively knew inside and what could be mainstreamed, we used science. Science was the bridge. The reason we chose science is because of respect science has in the third dimensional world. When science says something is real, when they prove something to be empirical, it takes on another level of belief and power and acceptance. And so we use science to do that. So HeartMath is based on a huge body of scientific research. There are now over 400 peer-reviewed research papers done with HeartMath work, ours and others, universities and people all around the world. And that has worked. It has given us the ability to go into many places where you would not think a heart-based system could go. And our work encompasses a wide range of people, everything from the really underserved, very, very challenged and struggling people to some of the most high-end people on the planet. In the little introduction you gave, Luke, you mentioned people like Greg and Joe. Well, these guys have been my friends now for 20 some years. We go back to when we were, talking in grunts and snorts and eating with our hands. I mean, it goes back a long way with us. And all along, all we've been doing is trying to help shift consciousness in whatever way we could do it. And so, yeah, we have technology at HeartMath, and I know you're into that. And our technology has been widely accepted. I'll explain a little bit about it. And there are a lot of different things that come from the external that are helping people now. But what's happening in the macro sense is we're in the midst of a dimensional shift in consciousness on planet Earth. The biggest shift in consciousness I believe we've ever had since humanity has been here. And it's a very opportunistic, but also very challenging time as a result of that. Allison mentioned earlier her thing about the soul moving in now more closely. Well, part of the dimensional shift is our soul, our spirit, what we call our heart mass, sometimes our large, now merging with our humanness. And it's happening all over the world, in every living system, really, whether we like it or not. Now, when that happens, it can be a really uplifting thing, but can also be very challenging because it doesn't necessarily relate to what the personality wants. It also exposes all the gaps that we have going on, and it exposes the dualities. It exposes all the biases and all the different things that are coming to the surface now. So at the end of the day, whether we use technology, whether we use HeartMath, whether we use something else, it comes down to this for me. Are we being kinder and gentler to ourselves and to others? Are we truly manifesting the qualities of the heart? Or are they still remaining conceptual? Are we bringing it down to the street to where we are having less judgments, to where we are putting out more love, more care into the energetic field environment that binds us all? Are we moving past our own resistances and our own past those thresholds of tolerance where we usually wouldn't grow? Are we taking those steps and are we courageously doing it? And are we doing it from a sense of mission, of recognizing that the world is going to go through this shift? Can we make it a kinder, gentler process? How do we facilitate people through these changing times? And I'm sure each and every one of you on this call has these feelings inside you and these thoughts, and you probably do great work in assisting others. So I want to applaud you for that, honor you for that, and appreciate you for that. So external technology. Well, HeartMath has the Inner Balance Trainer, our biggest seller, so to speak, and there's been millions of these things sold. And basically what they do, you can think of them as heart biofeedback. They don't measure anything in the brain, but we know from our research in many, many years that the heart communicates with the brain and the rest of the body. It's well documented, well understood. heart is a major contributor to how our entire body, including our brain, functions. So what we're measuring is the communication taking place between the heart, the brain, and the rest of the body with an inner balance trainer. It's measuring what we call heart rhythms, which is the beat-to-beat changes in how the heart is actually beating. It's not like a fitness monitor just measuring heart rate. It's really measuring the timing between heartbeats. And those heart rhythms reflect a lot of things. And one of the things they reflect the most is our emotional state. When we are experiencing what I'll call strong negative emotions, we're frustrated, we're angry, we're impatient, we're judging the hell out of somebody, we're getting upset about the politics, we're going through all that stuff that we go through when we watch the news. All of that creates incoherence in those heart rhythms that impact how we think, how we perceive, and they build neural pathways into the brain that begin to dictate really how we see ourselves and how we see the world. Conversely, when we make an emotional shift, that's when we decide not to judge and instead have compassion. That's when we decide to appreciate instead of complain. Those kind of subtle emotional shifts, when we do that, the heart rhythms respond instantaneously. And when we get to this place where we're really feeling those sustained, regenerative, uplifting emotions, the heart rhythms go into what's called a coherent pattern. When you see it on the inner balance trainer, it's a beautiful sine wave-like pattern of speeding up and slowing down. And that opens up everything in the brain. Higher perceptual centers in the brain activate, become more alive. Perceptions change, decision-making capacity changes, how we feel changes. And I'll take it one step further with a group like this that I wouldn't be saying on some interviews. In that state, that's when more of our soul and our spirit does integrate with our humanness. And it comes in not just through our brain, it comes in right through the heart, through the core of who we truly are, where our true intelligence resides. It gets transmitted at high speed to the brain. We experience it as thoughts or sometimes visions or different ways we experience it. But the real entry point, this is one of those things that I can't pull a scientific paper out and show you, but this is my experience. So this is one of those things that sometimes I call an according to me. So according to me, it's integrating through the heart. And it integrates through the heart when we're in a very coherent state. And that coherent state is a very loving state. So rambling around a little, I'll loop it back around. The inner balance trainer is cool. It trains you how to become more coherent. You buy a sensor, you attach it to your ear. There's an app, you see your heart rhythms, it gives you coherent scores, it does all that stuff. At the end of the day, it's training you how to love more. That's the secret. Mm-hmm. It's training you how to love more. And we employ this all around the world, and it's stealthy in a certain way because the science gives us entry points, as I mentioned, into places you wouldn't think we would be. We train in all 4 branches of the military. We train special forces units, Navy SEALs. We've trained 60,000 Dutch police officers in heart math. The entire Dutch police force knows heart math. It's going to be helpful when I can travel again and end up in that country. But we get into these very mainstream places, and in essence, what we're training them is we call it things like emotional self-regulation, situational awareness, operational readiness. I mean, we got terms for it, but what's really going on is teaching them to get in touch with their own hearts, and it's teaching them to love. And if we want a conscious hack and access some of these new dimensional frequencies that are actually in the world right now, the best way I know to do it is, again, to start with just putting out more love, care, kindness, and compassion. And let that start with you. Let that start right with you and make it real. Feel it. Have compassion for yourself. When you feel down like I do sometimes, or when you feel like you're not good enough, you feel like you're not going to get it, that you haven't done something right, that you've communicated something wrong, you've upset somebody, all those different things, I go away and start processing that. That's the perfect time to create a dimensional shift. And it comes out of conceptual at that point and goes down to practical. And that's the time when I have to say, it's okay, little dude, you're doing all right. You're doing the best thing you can. You're doing good work. You're a good man, and you're trying to help others, and just go with that. And just get out all that self-judgment, that looping that goes on in there. And that's an example of really true self-love. And when we do that, it empowers us to the point where we have much more radiational capacity, a greater ability to serve others, and we come together with less separation. And that's what creates the kind of harmony that a group like this is achieving now through this event. And through that harmony, that's how we come together and create a different and better world.
Amen. Wow, I love that.
Thank you.
Can I just say one quick thing?
Yeah.
You reminded me, what you shared was very resonant for me. It's beautiful. And that last little bit took me to this quote, when you know yourself, you know the world. And what I've heard all of us talking about in different languaging, is doing shadow work and having the courage and bravery to explore all dimensions, all aspects of ourselves, light, dark, healed, unhealed. And when we allow those previously denied, ignored, hidden out of shame, whatever we want to call it, components of ourselves to come to the front, and with that loving, conscious, compassionate awareness to speak to that scary aspect or that darker aspect, and to cultivate an unconditional love, and then we become fully integrated, and we face every aspect of ourselves, then we're able to look out into the external world and to face all other human beings with much greater compassion and unconditional love as well. But I know after I had my spiritual awakening, one of the first things I realized was, wow, I don't ever want to judge another person again, because I started to see all these different aspects of myself that I was so scared to look at before. So thank you for your share. It brought up that whole just unified love, unified compassion and kindness piece that I think is really, really vital right now, where everybody is really growing and awakening right now. And I think the biggest medicine is kindness to support all of that.
Well, I appreciate that. And I don't want to be the guy that's like coming out with the, the hardcore stuff here, all this hard work we got to do. It can be a fun adventure at the same time. It can be really cool. But the reason I talk about things like this in a group like I'm with today is that, we're the ones that can step up. We've got foundational pieces in place. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting already. It's really now time for us to take our next level as world servers, and to push beyond the next thresholds that we have to push past. But look, it's not as big a deal as we might think, because we've already done so much. That's the funny part. It's just working on those things that we keep saying that we're going to get to, but we haven't. Like judgments, those kind of things, and just taking the next step with those. And, you create the willy sometimes when that stuff comes up, a little neck hair comes up when something threatens the ego, but when you push past that little threshold there, and then boom, consciousness opens up, and then you start catching on to the game going, well, every time I get past one of those things gracefully, my life gets better. So why wouldn't I want more of that? And then the challenges or the threat of having to face those things decreases in the light of what you're going to gain from it. So a group like this, we've done the work, it's just look at it as refinement now, not as like having to rebuild everything. We can refine many of the things that we've already taken on, and many of the courageous challenges that we've already faced, to be different, to do things differently, to feel the judgments of others, and to still move on. All those different things that we've done, we've already done it. So let's take a group like this and let's take it to that next level, and let's make it a fun ride as we do.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Thank you for that. Dave, what role do you see in the use of plant medicines and psychedelics in connecting us to our higher selves and to expanding consciousness when it comes to more widespread acceptance of that from the medical establishment and also legally? What role do you see those little helpers having in carrying us to the next step, especially those that have done less of the work? And, from my observation, sometimes people that have done less of the work can be catapulted to higher levels of consciousness and awareness and inner healing pretty fast. Whereas I had spent 22 years of doing all the boots on the ground work before I ever touched any of that stuff. Then it's been about 2 years of just like, oh my God, I didn't know it was possible to move through some of those stuck pieces so quickly. So what do you have to say about that particular perspective? Oh, we lost your sound.
Huh, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I was just saying thank you for that question, and thank you, Howard, also for your words and the way you describe your work. I think that it's so important to think about our approach to healing and our approach to self-improvement in this way that you described, because loving yourself really is truly the most powerful consciousness hack that there is. Some of us have been so distanced from that for so long that we forgot that it's even something that we're capable of. And heart math is an amazing tool to do that. It was actually heart math and biofeedback practices and HRV biofeedback. These were extremely important tools that actually inspired us to develop Apollo, which is really works very nicely in combination with heart math. So I really appreciate the work that you and your team has done over there to spread love throughout the world and help people open their hearts. I think psychedelics along those lines, and really when we talk about psychedelics, we're talking about mind manifesting experiences. So I think that it's really important to note that there's a lot of stigma around that word because people most often refer to psychedelics as the drugs themselves or the plant medicine themselves. But psychedelic really refers to a quality or character of experience. So when we were talking about earlier, this idea of consciousness, so what's within our awareness in any given moment, like this conversation we're all having together right now, is just what's within our awareness in this moment. And then there's a whole million billion other things going on around us, in the room, outside of the room, throughout the whole world, throughout the universe, that are happening that we may or may not be aware of. But the things that we're not aware of fall into this category of what we typically refer to as subconscious or beneath awareness. So psychedelic experiences, and what psychedelic really means in the root of the word, is mind manifesting. So why this is such an interesting term to understand beyond just the medicines themselves, the drugs themselves, is that this applies to many different experiences that we have. It really refers to being able to blur for a short amount of time the boundary between our beneath awareness, our subconscious, and our conscious awareness for a certain amount of time, in ideally as controlled a way as possible, so that we can have an opportunity to draw from that subconscious material that is not normally necessarily available to us. Because being immersed in that subconscious material is vast and potentially even infinite. And so if we're constantly immersed in that material, it can be quite distracting and destructive to what we typically consider as Americans to be a productive, focused lifestyle. And so it's, in a lot of ways, accessing these deeper states gets pushed off in terms of priority because it's not necessarily where we're considered to be the most productive in Western society. However, these states are exquisitely important, whether you access them with drugs or plant medicine, or whether you access them with meditation, breath work, biofeedback, heart math, Apollo, however you decide to do it, soothing touch, soothing music, however you decide to access these powerful states or psychedelic states is up to you. And everyone has their own personal way of doing it. And psychedelics certainly, and plant medicine certainly aren't for everyone. But these terms, I think it's important to understand these terms are very broad and they apply to an enormous amount of experience that is important and almost critical for healing and accessing that truest sense of ourselves. So going back to your specific question, the Western medical field is woefully behind on integrating psychedelic experiences with drugs like MDMA or ketamine, or plant medicines like psilocybin or ayahuasca into Western culture, even though they've been around for in some cases thousands of years. And part of that is because the Western scientific paradigm has for a long time just not been able to demonstrate how they work. And we're a very reductionist, we take a very reductionist approach in Western medicine historically. And so if we can't demonstrate how something works, then, and why it works the way it does, then, and how to avoid risk in using these medicines, then it is something that we typically in the medical field shy away from, unfortunately. However, now, thanks to the work of people like Rick Doblin and many other wonderful souls who have devoted their lives to understanding these medicines from a Western scientific approach, we now actually do understand a lot about how they work and how they facilitate access to these, blurring the boundary between our subconscious and our conscious to allow us to draw from that subconscious beneath awareness material and then literally manifest that in our day-to-day lives as positive change or healing or whatever it is that our intention sets our minds on, which could be a lot of different things, and potentially also infinite in terms of what we can do, because consciousness, I think most people would agree, is infinite in and of itself. So plant medicines and psychedelic medicines, specifically talking about the drugs, are really the biochemical way that we can access these psychedelic experiences that are facilitated by a chemical or by a group of chemicals found naturally in a plant. And the tribal approach to this is that there's actually a spirit in that plant. And when you consume that plant in the respectful manner that the plant has instructed us to consume it in, or use it in whatever way that we use it, then we have access to all of the benefits, all of the beauty and magic, for lack of a better term, of what that plant can offer us, which isn't necessarily unique to plants, but that's what I think is a very interesting tribal approach that is now gradually finding its way back into Western culture. So I actually, to try to bridge the gap, I actually started a nonprofit that I co-founded with a number of leading Western scientific experts that now also brings in Eastern experts, called the Board of Medicine, which is a medical board that is consistent with the way that we typically set medical policy in the US. And we have come to a consensus that plant medicines and psychedelic experiences on the whole are incredibly powerful and critical to the healing of ourselves and the healing of our communities. And so we are actually working with practitioners, working with MAPS, working with a bunch of other different organizations to start to help facilitate the entry or the transition of a lot of this ancient knowledge into the way that we practice modern medicine for the future of all healthcare, which really should be medicine that heals, not medicine that suppresses symptoms. And so that is sort of, I would say, where things are moving and why these medicines can be so critical, because when we have things buried so deeply in our subconscious from our childhood, from experiences we've tucked away and shut down because they're so painful, even from past life experiences, we know psychedelics can help facilitate access to. There's a lot of at least from individual accounts, there's a lot of really fascinating material there that can be worked on to help alleviate what the South American tribes people call trauma, that literally creates spiritual energetic blocks that prevent us from accessing our fullest potential and our true selves. So the medicines that we talk about that you mentioned, Luke, are just one of many ways to access these powerful psychedelic healing states that hopefully over the next couple years, we will start to see surfacing much, much more and becoming much more widespread in Western medicine.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a really great distinction there. And it brings to mind, I mean, gotta be mindful of the time because I could go on and on. But as I said, as someone who spent 22 years, going to India, learning to meditate, doing all the things, I mean, it really would take hours to rattle off all the different tools and I guess tools of communication between my higher self and the field of consciousness, and to dive into the subconscious as deeply as possible and root out those things that have been blocking me. I made a lot of progress, but man, there was really, for me, and this is, I have to give the disclaimer as you did, these experiences aren't for everyone at all times. Although every time I have one of them, I think, oh my God, we got to put this in the water supply. The world needs to have this experience because, subjectively, so much profound healing has taken place. But to your comment on the ability of, whatever states of consciousness, I mean, I've had similar things happen in breath work and Kundalini yoga to a lesser degree. But one of the things that came up for me as an example, to Dave's point, was during an ayahuasca experience in Costa Rica almost 2 years ago. I was not having any perceived effects on this particular evening. And I was just kind of laying there feeling a bit nauseous. I wasn't having the really profound, rocket ship experience that I had the night prior. And at one point, I just started daydreaming about 4 a.m. and wasn't really hallucinating or having really a perceivable plant medicine effect or anything psychedelic going on, but I just kind of daydreaming a little bit. And I was taken into this vision of a hospital. And I walked into the hospital, walked down a hall, opened a door, and there was my mother giving birth to me. And it was me just observing that in sort of a half dream, kind of a lucid dream sort of state. And I came out of my mom, and the nurses put me on her chest, and she was crying tears of joy and was extremely ecstatic that I was there, and it was all beautiful. And then rather abruptly, the nurses came and just grabbed me and whisked me away and took me down the hall alone and put me in an incubator and just left me there. And then I kind of came out of this and I thought, oh, that was a strange vision. And the next morning I sent a text message to my mom and I said, wow, I'm here in Costa Rica doing ayahuasca. She probably doesn't even know what it is, you know? And I just had this memory or this vision, and I was curious if that was anything like what had happened. And it was exactly what had happened at the time of my birth, with the exception being that they wrapped me in a blanket before they put me on her chest, because in the vision I was just like naked on her chest, you know? And she said, yeah, there was a risk of infection, and they threw you in that incubator for about 4 days and no one could touch you.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just like, I mean, it was so profound.
Yeah.
You know,
Such a powerful experience.
to the root. And then what happened was, in the integration, was unraveling all of the abandonment issues and other issues that I've had throughout my, you know, adolescence, into my teens, my 20s, into my adult life. And so many of those things that have blocked me from having a more rich and full experience of life, and my ability to truly serve and to be seen and to hold and be held and to love and be loved, were rooted in those first 4 days. And I don't know if I ever would have been able to fully unpack that had I not had the assistance of that communication tool. Mm-hmm. So that medicine was a tool, or kind of a walkie-talkie between me and the ever-present moment, right? Because that moment of birth is the moment that we're in right now. It's just a different punctuation mark in one long now. And I don't know if I would have ever been able to access that. And I'm sure I would have had a great life and everything would have been fine anyway. But it was such, I mean, that's one of just, I could go on and on about the experiences I've had that have been that profound and life-changing. And using all of the therapy and meditation, everything I did in the 22 years prior, really allowed me to contextualize it and integrate that and to find the meaning in that. And then to go back, come back home and really look at how that particular experience showed up in my life. And as a result of being able to have that awareness, I was able to sever those patterns and rewire the way that I relate. And the beautiful example of that I have sitting here in my fiance, Allison, is a testament to my ability to surrender those abandonment fears, because I saw where they came from. And I'm not that little baby anymore that is left alone, cold in a fluorescent lit room. You know, it's like, I don't have to behave from that point of view. And I think all of the different tools of communication that we have to tap into consciousness, if we're courageous enough and have a framework to do so, really give us the ability to undo, as was indicated earlier, not only all of those points in our life that have colored our psyche and thus our behavior, but also in prior lives. And I've had other experiences that were deeply profound as well, that covered lifetimes in the past and things that needed to be grieved and healed even before I was embodied as the guy I am today. So it's a really beautiful time to be alive, because there are so many different tools that we have available to us, and there's something for everyone. If someone's not the person for ayahuasca, there's an Apollo, or there's one of my favorite technologies called New Calm, which is a just profoundly deep meditative state available on demand through some neuroacoustic software. And, you know, there's all kinds of stuff like this now where you don't have to take any plant medicines or psychedelics, and you can still go into the quantum. And if you know what you're doing in there and you have a little bit of insight, training, and intention, you can go into the quantum and into the subconscious and really rework things. And when you come back out, it's different.
Well, we talk about that a lot, how, you know, and I know we're probably, I think, at our max time, so I won't get too deep into this.
Oh, man,
but,
that goes by fast.
You know, that's been the beauty of Luke and I coming together. We were friends for many years before we got engaged, but, you know, we walk the spiritual path and do the consciousness hacking in oftentimes very, very different ways. And as a shamanic practitioner, I was a shaman, for many, many years before any plant medicines called to me. I didn't know if it would ever be a part of my path. So, he really gravitates to those experiences. And I really don't. And the joke is, I don't need the mushrooms to have a mushroom journey. I don't need the, I'll experiment with some of his technological consciousness devices and gadgets that I probably would not gravitate to on my own or have in the house, but they're here, and I'm open-minded and always want to experiment. And then I'll come out of 2 minutes of one and say, oh, I just went to the mothership and this new being came to me, and then I was docked on Mars, and then I was remote viewing in Africa and Spain, and that's 2 minutes into one of the gadgets that he has, and he's like, really? And so I don't know, I just think I wanted to end on that point that as we are here birthing a new earth and in this time of great awakening, and I agree with, I forget who said, I also believe that in the history of humanity, that the planet and humans and beings, we have not ever seen a time quite like this. And so it is this beautiful amalgam and merging and mixing of, with the years that have gone on with all this incredible, powerful technology. Yes, some of it can create disconnect and separation, yet thankfully, there are devices like some of the ones that you all on this panel have invented yourselves that do the opposite, that create conscious connection. So I just think it's important to note the reconnecting to the ancient wisdom within us. And if we can partake in some of those ceremonial whether it just be drumming or creating an altar space, or working with sustainable Palo Santo, just to on an ancient soul level to remember that scent, to remember what holy wood smells like. I know it transports you to ancient times when I smudge you and things like that. They're just such basic tools that we can use to awaken the ancient wisdom within us that transports us into these expanded consciousness states, while being open-minded to some of these other more technological devices that can, that can also expand consciousness. So with the new earth birthing, I just think it's cool and important to have a balance of both of those worlds. Yeah.
Amen, sister.
Absolutely.
So I guess we are just about out of time, but I'd like to perhaps just get a closing statement from each of us. Howard, what would you say would be your primary recommendation for someone who seeks to expand their consciousness? What's the first place to start?
Well, just take good care of yourself and especially each other. That's a great place to start. And follow your heart, the deeper part of your heart, not the soft, sweet, mushy one, but that core part of your heart. Just take it step by step. It's there for you. It's your own best friend. It's your own most reliable guide that you have right now to navigate in these changing times. And it'll help you make choices, good choices, big and small, that'll lead you through this little matrix that we're going through right now that takes you into a different state of consciousness. Keep it simple. Try not to make it too complex. And again, the kinder, gentler approach to yourself is a great starting point. And then put some care and some love out, take care of each other. And I think that's where I like to end it in terms of what I think is going to help us manifest and then sustain and make it real, a new consciousness.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Dave?
Similarly, I think I would say, the practice of gratitude, self-gratitude, starting with really focusing on what we can be grateful for in ourselves, even if that's just the ability to be present with taking a breath right now in this moment, and just being grateful and expressing gratitude for that fundamental interface with everything else around us, and being able to feel that air coming in and filling our lungs with conscious energy, and that we can then express outward. And over time, the brain is a practice makes perfect system. And as we practice things like gratitude, which is a fundamental and ancient thought technique and emotional skill, we get stronger at actually rewiring our brains and our bodies and our hearts, and that connection that Howard was talking about between our heart and our mind, to be centered around gratitude and love and compassion and these ancient ancient wisdom that is always available to us, but that we sometimes forget about because we're so overwhelmed and caught up in everything else that's going on. And so being able to help remember, not only for ourselves to remember to be grateful, but also to help remind others of what to be grateful for and how to practice gratitude in the simplest way, is so critical. And breath in conjunction with gratitude, I think, is the key to unlocking our spirit. And the more that we can practice that, the more that we can access our wholer versions of ourselves, for not just for ourselves, but also for our communities at large.
Awesome.
I feel like I kind of already got my last little bit in, but I will just end with a reminder that I already touched upon, is to just enjoy the infinite exploration, of ourselves, of human relations, of speaking with the animals, and calling upon the guidance of Great Spirit and Great Gaia in our own hearts and souls. And it's just the most miraculous, wildest, beautiful, evolutionary adventure to be incarnated in these human forms, especially at this time, and that it's not about perfection, and it's not about doing things the right way all the time. It's about the learning and the growing and the willingness and the openness, and to enjoy ourselves as much as we can along that very growing pain at times journey that it is.
Thank you. And I'll end on something, because those three were just a great summary of the big picture. I'll end on something that's a bit more zoomed in, and that is, in my own experience, what makes all of that a lot more possible is getting really great sleep. Really making sleep a practice and a priority. This is something, I'm obsessed with my Aura Ring, my sleep scores. I'm constantly experimenting with different ways to improve my sleep, and really just to pay attention to my circadian biology and how I relate to light, and cutting off blue light at night, and sun gazing as many sunrises and sunsets as possible, and really just staying in tune in that regard. And then something that's huge for me too is doing ice baths and starting my day with an ice bath. Breath work, meditation, various forms of meditation, whether technology assisted or just on the natch, and doing that. And I'm really giving myself this message, because I don't do that perfectly, but doing all of that before getting into social media and checking the news and having my fight or flight response override what I know to be true. And what I know to be true is that we are safe, and that all is well, and all will be well. It's much easier for me to keep that perspective if I really focus on my morning routine after a good night's sleep, and really tuning my nervous system into the man that I want to be that day, rather than the man that is reacting to the stimuli that I expose myself to on social media and elsewhere in the world. So the morning practice and the sleep practice to me is the foundation of being able to actually manifest the day and the week and the months and years that I want to see in my life. So I'll close with that, and just thank everyone that's been on the panel today. It's been really fun to get to know you, Howard, and to see you again, Dave, and spend some time with Allison. And with that, I'll hand it back over to our hosts.
Take care, everyone. Be well.
You too.